Aboriginal people have lived in Greater Australia for over 50,000 years, leaving traces of their story everywhere they went. Through the last ice age, they survived the longest drought in human history, only to be faced by a new challenge. The planet started heating up. The sea level rose by over 130 meters, swallowing 1/4 of the continent. The Great Flood is a story of ingenious inventions, cultural explosions, conflicts, and new nations. The Great Flood is remembered by the Pitjantjatjara in the Warinyinyi dreaming.
People killing there. All of land becoming killing in there. I see.
18,000 years ago on the Nullarbor, the rising sea began to flood the south of the continent. Up to 100 kilometers of land was lost every generation.
Daraja. Daraja. Kalinya aja lah. Nggak malu nyanyi nak ada cota tu.
Dua.
Angkat cuat.
The Warinyinyi, or desert finch dreaming, tells of the creation of the land and the people who live here. Many of the details are secret and sacred, so cannot be revealed. But the story of the Great Flood can be told.
Pudding aja nih. Pudding aja nih. Wow. Karena ngajar jalan yang udah. Ayah kami yang ada ngajar berbagai.
Dua.
Marco long way.
Dua.
Pipo, baca ulang hari jangan mendengar dan tahu ada. Mai pada, mai cabu, mai ujung berbeda dacing.
Dua.
Apa ni? Kalau jangan ulang hari jangan lip.
Dua in the ancient ancestry, ancient past.
Jangan dah. Ayah kami yang ada ngajar berbagai. Yang tinggal ulang. Jangan gampang.
In the dreaming story, the Warinyinyi, or desert finch ancestral beings, traveled from their homeland in the center of the continent to confront the Great Flood. The Warinyinyi bundled their spears together and dived into the water to form the cliffs of the Nullarbor. All the Warinyinyi drowned, but the ocean was stopped.
Masa jangan keluar bang.
Dua.
Nama mak. Iya. Munkara.
Dua.
Ered.
Dua.
Munkara mulam.
As an archaeologist, we know the sea was way out, beyond the horizon, right? Parari. And then slowly came in. And on the science, right, we know it started to come in 18,000 years ago, out there, and then it came up and up and up and up. Stopped. It stopped at 6,700 years ago, which means if the two stories are about the same thing, it's the oldest religious story in the world. Right? What do you think about that? Kulini? Tell the story, tell the story. No school. School Murba. Tell the story, tell the story. Not make up Mularba and Jugurba. Jungu. Myth as history, myth as history. History, Mularba. Really one.
My father, Nana Samu,
Yeah.
Nindining.
Yeah, told them and educated them. His grandfather. Listen to the law, listen to the law.
Stories about the Great Flood have been passed down for hundreds of generations all around Australia. In the northeast of the continent, Garngor, the seagull woman, pulled her raft backwards and forwards across the land to form the Wellesley Islands in the Gulf of Carpentaria. In South Australia, Nurrunjeri sent a tidal wave in a rage to drown his wives, separating Kangaroo Island from the mainland. When the seas began to flood the northwest of the continent, Murujuga was still a series of hills above a plain. Here, the story of the Great Flood is etched in stone. Thousands of engravings show the remarkable adaptation to a totally different environment. The engravings from the period before the Great Flood are all land animals, especially the kangaroo.
And certainly here we have a lovely example of the kangaroo. This image would date from roughly 12,000 years ago. It's at a time when in Europe people were still running around in caves. You still hadn't invented agriculture. The pyramids are still 5,000 years away from being constructed. People were producing fantastic images on these rock surfaces across the archipelago.
Ken Mulvaney is working with the traditional owners of Murujuga, like Tyson Maurin, to understand the effects rising seas had on his ancestors.
Here we're sitting amongst an interesting group of 4 kangaroos. All have a characteristic of lines that are actually cutting into the image of the kangaroo, most likely depicting hunting or a hunting magic.
This site clearly had great symbolic importance. Then, around 7,000 years ago, there came a profound change.
Over here, we have a fish that has been added. We've got the tail of the fish, the body coming around with one fin here, the head round here, second fin out that side back to the tail, and it's completely pecked in. Clearly it relates to a period after the sea levels got here. Roughly 7,000 years ago.
The first bloke who got the kangaroo, you know, they were real bush people. When the sea rose, and then those same people became closer to the sea, so then they started being sea people, eating more, having a lot more to do with the ocean.
As the seas came in, all the engravings changed to sea animals. They show a complete shift in diet and ways of hunting. These were sea people now, and they felt compelled to express that shift on some of the hardest rocks on Earth.
What's really nice is where you've got these turtles that have been engraved over the top of the kangaroo, and it really shows the time difference between the phases. So here we've got the large outline kangaroo, tail there, hind leg, forelimbs there, pair of ears and his head in here, and then over the top you can see the turtle there and with the head.
Turtle on his head. You know, just imagine maybe as a young fella might have got their first turtle out on a hunting trip or something, you know, to feed their family. But those young fellas, you know, they must have been pretty proud to know that they've maybe got their first kill or something, and they're stepping up and they're providing for their family. So, you know, they're recording that story. You can just imagine how good they would have felt.
Tyson's ancestors studied every ecological detail of the new sea animals, like the turtle. Here on this rock, they engraved the turtle's life cycle, relating it to the seasons of the year.
In this case, we have a mating turtle, and we can tell this. You see the double pairs of flippers, and over here, a rather small, presumably a juvenile turtle representing the hatchling or a young turtle. In this one, we have a turtle with this line, which presumably is the stabbing spear that they use for hunting turtles in this area. So we have a full sequence representing the life cycle of the turtle.
In the Kimberley, when the seas first began to rise, the monsoon set in. For the Wunumbulgambara people, this was a time of creation.
The Wanjanai, our great spirit, took out from his halo the cloud and threw it up in the sky. Then the cloud grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Then the rain started to pour. And it created the land and the rivers and lakes and even the water holes that we have today.
Here, the warm and wet climate didn't just force changes in diet. Over 12,000 years ago, it gave rise to a spectacular flourishing of culture. The Wunumbulgambara created the earliest paintings of ceremony in the world, the Gwion figures. The Wunumbulgambara and a major archaeological team are piecing together this ancient cultural explosion. Middens are excavated to determine diet. Pigments are X-rayed to find out where the ochre used came from. But the greatest insights into life 12,000 years ago are found in the intricate details of the paintings themselves.
You can see here there's a bush yam. You can see it's like a bush potato there. A lot of food they carry.
This one is carrying where most people would call it dilla bag. Here you can see again, some got a bit of thing hanging down from their arm. They all gotta be dancing this.
Alberts, look at this. Look at the detail here. This figure here, I particularly like because you can see the hair's been pulled into tiny little pigtails or plaits, and you can actually see where it's been knotted at the end. But under the arms, there's more decorations coming down here, quite elaborate decorations. And the armlets go both round the arm, and then there's tufts going up. We think probably plant material would make those. And the pair of boomerangs in this hand. And if you follow this figure up, unfortunately a chip's fallen out of there. You can see an enormous headdress going back.
Sometimes they used to put bee wax on their head and make it stiff. And in the end, they make a little ball and they just pluck out an emu feather, wrap it around and just put it there just to decorate themselves.
You can see the boy reaching out to his father there. They are getting ready for ceremony, big corroboree.
Young boys become men.
It was as if the artist was saying, this boy's new life must be marked and celebrated with joy.
Imagine the headdresses as they danced around. Imagine the shapes, the twirling of all these different accoutrements.
All over the Kimberley, thousands of these elaborate celebrations of life are being rediscovered. It's increasingly clear this remote and rugged country supported a vast and rich culture.
The spirit is right here.
This is where my grandfather camped,
And all people, and the cave did.
Pretty amazing panel, isn't it?
You want to run it? You can flick the switch for me. This is the first time that a Guion panel's ever been X-rayed. So if you just flick that for me, Albert, back towards you. First time ever.
And what?
X-rays going in.
this is special. For the old people left this here for us to see it, so we can show you guys and everybody else that was here in this cave right now, painting here and walking around, hunting.
The 61 giant Guion figures in this shelter show that hunting here was very good.
Each one of the figures have a slight paunch, but then they nip in at the waist. I think that the paunch might mean that the people were relatively well-fed, relatively affluent. There's probably something to say. There's not fat on too many hunter-gatherer groups, and I think that a bit of roundness might have been something that was admired.
The abundance in the art suggests that 12,000 years ago, there were plenty of resources for everyone.
Very rarely you get somebody holding a fighting position, but mostly people seem to be in a passive position. And it may be that the competition for resources, territoriality, wasn't so strong in those days, so there wasn't that tension. It was much more a coming together of people. It's amazing to think that this was painted thousands and thousands of years ago, and I can sit here today and get a glimpse of what their life was like. I mean, no history book will tell you that. This is, goes back much further than any history book can.
My people have been living here for thousands and thousands of years, from the dream time.
"800 kilometers to the east in Arnhem Land, another richly expressive culture emerged at precisely the same time.
There's so many figures in different poses. They're racing across the wall, tumbling, falling, some standing, and lots of material culture. So this figure is standing on one leg in that classic pose that often we see Aboriginal men in. And this one has 4 boomerangs, 3 in one hand, and the other one in a position ready to be thrown. And the legs are spread right out, suggesting that it's moving really fast, racing across the landscape.
The figures are so detailed and dynamic, they bring to life stories from 12,000 years ago.
This poor fellow has fallen to the ground, just lying prostrate with a spear right through the torso. But behind it is a figure that looks like it's racing in, flailing away with this boomerang, perhaps to give the coup de grace. If someone killed someone else, then there would be payback from the family of the deceased. And maybe that's what's going on. This guy may have killed someone from the family of these people, and they're rushing to punish him. Here's a wonderful figure. What's really fascinating is these dashes coming out of the mouth. 2 streams of them, suggestive of sound, that the figure's speaking. And again, that adds to the animation, the liveliness of not only this particular design, but the whole panel. We have the earliest depictions of sound and motion, these amazing scenes of action, quite different from and earlier than this sort of art from any other part of the world. When we look at the rock art of Australia, we can see that particular styles run across very large regions. The dynamic figures, the Guion figures, are a form of high art. They're major cultural developments, and that suggests that there wasn't just a small population struggling for survival, but rather a fairly large group with a very sophisticated visual culture, ceremonial culture, spiritual culture that persisted for long periods of time in these regions.
These early stages of the Great Flood were times of immense creativity. In the Guion and dynamic art, we see for the first time one of the most ingenious inventions of the ancient past. the boomerang.
Well, what I have here is the oldest wooden boomerang in the world that we know of. It's 9,000 years old.
Wooden boomerangs decay quickly, but this ancient boomerang was preserved in a peat swamp in South Australia. It has the same aerodynamic contours of all boomerangs.
It's a plano-convex foil, airfoil, like an aeroplane wing. Flattened face under here, that's the plano element, and then the convex surface is the top surface. Air, that as it hits it, will flow smoothly over that surface. Now, what that means is there's less pressure on the top, and that brings the boomerang up. That gives the lift. That's why the aeroplane rises off the tarmac.
Hunting boomerangs have been found in other parts of the world, but the returning boomerang is unique to Australia. It involves even more astounding physics.
The returning boomerang is an astonishing achievement. We don't know how it originated. We can only assume trial and error, and that people understood, first of all, that plano-convex form was something which could impart aerodynamic qualities. And then later, this observation that gyroscopic precession, as we know it today, could cause a boomerang to turn and come back. People could launch a boomerang 100 or 200 or even 300 metres on a good day and have it return to their hand. The returning boomerang, and this is from the Geelong area of Victoria, they were used in southeastern Australia and southwestern Australia primarily for hunting water birds. You could fly the boomerang above a flock of birds. It would hover before returning, and that would cause the water birds to think that a hawk was above them and they were in trouble. So they would fly down, and the hunters would hoist the net so the water birds would all fly into the net. So a very sophisticated choreography of hunting in which the returning boomerang is the central player.
Boomerangs were used across the mainland as a multi-purpose tool for butchering, for fighting, for making fire, and music. Yet, as the environment changed, the boomerang vanished from Arnhem Land.
Ah, what a view. This is a wonderful place to come to terms with why the boomerang disappeared in this part of the country. 10,000 years or more ago, this was all grassland. But today, it's covered with forest. This plain would have been very, very different. It would have been an ideal place to use a boomerang for hunting and bringing down kangaroos and emus and other mammals and birds. But once the climate changed